One constraint doesn't finish and the other one begins. What should we do? Let's learn from today's story. Welcome to Thank God It's a Saturday weekly video series where I share stories with you that you can use to make your messages connect. Yes, today's story is again from a Beautiful Constraint. I am doing a series of stories from my favorite book, Beautiful Constraint. Why? Because constraints are the only constant right now. So, up until the mid-1960s, a community of people in Hatzirim, which is in the southern part of Israel, it's in the desert, a southern part of Israel, group of people who had barely managed their living through farming. They realized that their existence has to be made possible by a business idea that could go with their expertise in farming, agriculture. So what they decided to do was to start working with an engineer by the name of Simcha Balas. A few years earlier, something had happened. Simcha Balas had noticed that when there are trees planted at the same time in a row, there is this one particular tree out of all the trees that are planted, which is a fuller, taller, and looks a lot more healthier. When he goes and checks out, he realizes that the pipe, the water pipe, which is used to give water to these trees, actually has a leak right next to this particular tree, which is looking fuller and taller. Get to see that this drip system, which is called drip irrigation, is far better for a plant's growth than a sprinkler system or flooding it with water. Now, when Simcha Balas realized this, they thought of turning this idea into a business idea, but they had to wait for water tubings to come out, the plastic water tubings to come out before this idea could be commercialized. When this idea came out, this particular community decided to use it for their own purposes. When they used it for their own agriculture purposes, their 50% of the water consumption dropped, and their peaches, pears, apricots improved so dramatically that this community of people decided that they're going to keep this at their little secret and not tell anybody else. But of course, they wanted to use this opportunity for a much bigger ambition rather than just keep it within their community and create a business idea. That is where a new venture would come out, a joint venture between the community of these people and Balas, the engineer, and the company would be called Netafim. When this book, Beautiful Constraint, was written, at that time, Netafim was an $800 million company. This company was born out of the tension between ambition and constraint, above and beyond the initial need to know how to grow crops in the desert. Now, this is not it. After Netafim started to globally expand, they faced another constraint, which was the resources. They only had 14 full-time staff working in production, and they had one of their founding principles that they will not hire anybody from outside. So how do they overcome that constraint? Everyone from that community, not just those 14 full-time people, once a week will do a shift at the production site. Now, what that did was that it brought everyone really closer and connected and made them much more knowledgeable about this drip irrigation system. Again, they wanted to have a global impact and not just, work within their community. But regionally, due to political tension, they couldn't sell their technology of drip irrigation system regionally around because nobody would buy regionally from them. So they had to figure out ways to start exporting to Europe and build collaborations and ability to sell in Europe. They overcame that too. Further down, they had a constraint that although Netafim had made this irrigation available because it costed a lot. Therefore, they started working with governments like the government of India to get subsidies so that they could provide this drip irrigation system at a much lower cost. What is the point of this story? The point of this story is that constraint after constraint after constraint, but those who have the ability and the muscle to overcome constraint, no matter what the constraint is, turn their constraints into beautiful constraint. What is that one constraint you are feeling right now? Think, how can you make that into a beautiful constraint? Stay storied, and I'll see you here next Saturday with another story.